What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We now have Invest 95B, that was Invest 99W, that has now moved into the Indian Ocean, more exactly the Bay of Bengal, impacting the Andaman Islands in India, as well as parts of Sumatra over here. And cyclone development is currently underway as it is approaching India and Bangladesh to bring some potentially major impacts to those regions. Here's the situation we have right now. Maximum sustained winds are at 20 knots or 23 miles per hour. Its current location is 4.9 degrees north, 92.8 degrees east. The minimum central pressure is 1,007 millibars. And based off of what we're seeing with the models, it is now expected to be impacting India and potentially Bangladesh as a cyclone. So here's what we have with the models right here. This is the track and potential intensity models from the ensembles that are brought by the GFS ensembles right here. Here's the situation. The models are now expecting this thing to kind of slowly organize and develop in the next 48 hours into a tropical storm equivalent, and then it starts to really ramp up in intensity according to what we're seeing, potentially becoming a cyclone in the next 3 to 4 days, and then it continues to strengthen with a lot of these ensembles now advocating for a 960s millibar cyclone going on, which for those of you who do not know how strong that is, that's equivalent to like a 100 mile per hour or so tropical cyclone. So that's the equivalent right there of a 960s millibar system, just for some perspective right there, or 160 kilometers, and then, kilometers per hour, and then basically from there on out, due to increased wind shear and increased dry air, it does start to gradually weaken as the official track starts to head towards Bangladesh, although we're seeing an increasing number of models of this thing impacting southeastern India, so it's definitely something that we need to pay attention to as time continues to go on, as India is the most populated country in the world, and there's a lot of population centers that could be in this potential track that we all need to keep an eye out for. So that's what we have going on with the track models and all that stuff going on. Now we're going to go ahead and show you some model runs that we can kind of corroborate this and get a better picture of what we're potentially looking at. We're going to start with the European model, and we're going to start with the operational, and then we're going to go to the shear and the moisture forecast to give you a better understanding of what I'm looking at. So based off what I'm seeing right here, we're starting to see signs of organization and development in the next 24 hours, and then by 48 hours, it starts to have a centralized low pressure as it starts to move through the central part of the Bay of Bengal, and then start to organize and develop, and then strengthen into a cyclone as it gets closer and closer to India, gets down to a 990s millibar system according to the operational, potentially up to 1,000 as it makes landfall in southeastern India over there, and then kind of moves through, weakens due to land interaction, moves kind of out to sea a little bit before kind of dissipating over Bangladesh as it moves further to the east. So that's what we have going on, at least with the European operational now. We have other models having this a lot stronger, so we'll have to pay attention to this. We're going to start with the shear forecast to kind of give you a better corroboration of what we're potentially looking at. If we're looking at the wind shear as of right now, the wind shear across much of the Bay of Bengal is not very favorable for tropical development, for cyclone development, not really much going on, but that shear is forecasted to start weakening in a little bit. If we go ahead and start showing you that in the next 48 hours, we start to see the shear start to regress quite a bit. It's about down to here. Now it's getting a little bit better, where this thing is starting to organize and develop, and it is gonna persist in the northern part of the Bay of Bengal for several days, but it is expected to stay in a relatively low sheared environment until that point, and then it's expected to start approaching India and Bangladesh. The wind shear does become a potential hazard for this thing to really develop. It could potentially hamper the development if it persists long enough, but if that extremely powerful wind shear stays far enough away from this cyclone, then we could see a situation where it ends up enhancing the outflow and really helping it start to organize and develop if it stays far enough away from the core of the circulation. And this wind shear starts to finally weaken in the 24 hours or so before making landfall, although it's mainly persistent in the northern part of the Bay of Bengal. But in the southern half of the Bay of Bengal, which includes the Indian coast over here, the wind shear does weaken just enough for this thing to strengthen before making landfall, and then land interaction starts to go on through there. So definitely something to pay attention to as time continues to go on. So the shear could be the thing that does inhibit its initial strengthening. But one thing I want to pay attention to is the moisture, because I've seen tropical systems and tropical cyclones with large amounts of wind shear impacting it, but start to continue organizing and developing anyway. So I want to go ahead and check the dry air and the relative humidity to get a better understanding of what we're looking at. And as you can see, with the exception of the extreme northern part of the Bay of Bengal, where Calcutta, where Dhaka, where Bangladesh is, that area, it's in a very moist area of air right there. It's in an area of moisture through much of the Bay of Bengal, and that's expected to persist. And the dry air actually does recede quite a bit in the northern part of the Bay of Bengal, but it continues to moisten up across this part of the central and southern part of the Bay of Bengal right there. So definitely something to pay attention to, and we still have a lot of moisture for this thing to really work with. The dry air does start to come back a bit in the northern part of the Bay of Bengal, but that's not expected to really hamper it unless it starts to make a turn to the northeast as it approaches either Calcutta, Dhaka, those areas right there. So definitely something to pay attention to. And as this thing starts to organize and develop, it does potentially impact a little bit of moderately dry air over India, but the cyclone does a really good job, according to the European, of really fighting off that dry air and allowing that moist air to really persist and allow this thing to develop. So one thing I will say is that if the wind shear doesn't collapse and it holds through much of the Bay of Bengal, we could see a slower situation, like a slower organization period and a slower strengthening period than what we were initially seeing. But if we start seeing a decrease of even 10 knots of the wind shear that is forecasted, then that could cause significant issues, and that could really help enhance this thing to organize and develop faster, which means more impacts for a lot of you tuning in from India and Bangladesh. So this is definitely something to pay attention to say at the very least. Next model we're going to go ahead and show you is the GFS model, the GFS operational rather. The GFS operational has been very consistent with this thing moving towards India and then curving towards Bangladesh, but impacting that wind shear and dry air, with it really starting to weaken as it approaches there. If we take a look at the GFS, it starts showing really good signs of organization and development, and by 5 days out, it's already a 991 millibar tropical cyclone. With winds, I would have to estimate, actually we can go ahead and take a look at it right here, the main sea level pressure winds right here. If we go, I can go ahead and try to zoom in. I don't think we can zoom in on it, but if we can get a good picture of it right here from the main sea level pressure and 10 meter winds, we're seeing areas of over 50 knots of wind shear according to what we're seeing with this model right here. Am I saying it's going to be the strength it's going to be at? Most likely not. It'll probably be a little bit stronger than that, but the winds at 850 definitely are cause for alarm as this thing starts to really enhance and really start strengthening, as well as expanding in size too. And then it gets down to a 980s millibar system, gets down to 970 millibars. I want to check the winds on that. If we go ahead and show you that, there's a very tight pressure gradient going on, and I can see an area of about 80 knots of wind, 80 knot winds, or about 90 mile per hour winds for those tuning in from Burma. So definitely something to pay attention to. The winds could definitely be stronger than this, as this is just a computer model that's doing its best to show what it has to offer. And then it makes landfall near the Bangladesh-Burma border, or Myanmar. I like to call it Burma because it's a lot easier, but I know it's Myanmar, so I do apologize for that. Makes landfall as a 980s millibar system, and kind of brings some impacts to Bangladesh, the Assam province of India, and Myanmar. So definitely something to pay attention to as time continues to go on. Next model we're showing you is the CMC model, and the CMC, or the Canadian model rather, shows signs of organization and development really quickly. By 84 hours out, we're down to a 997 millibar system, and it's bringing some potential outer bands towards Sri Lanka right there before starting to turn north and bring impacts to India. As by the time this thing starts to make landfall in that area over there, we're starting to see areas well, not areas, but winds exceeding about 80 to potentially 90 knots, or about 90 to 100 miles per hour for those of you tuning in from Myanmar. So definitely something to pay attention to. Then it makes landfall, weakens due to land interaction, but brings a lot of impacts to this part of India, particularly with the wind and the rainfall and potential storm surge for those of you who are tuning in from the lower leveled communities. So definitely something to pay attention to as we continue to look into this. Next model we're going to go ahead and show you is the NavGem. And the NavGem model is showing signs of quick organization and development, although it's at a slower pace than the GFS and CMC are advocating for. It does get down to the 980s, and it gets down to 977 millibars before making landfall. If we can go ahead and cross-check those winds right there, yeah, it's in a very big area of 80-plus knots, potentially up to 90 knots of wind if we go ahead. We can't pluck soundings, unfortunately, with this model right there, but this is the best we can give you, and already, we're looking at a particularly strong cyclone as this thing approaches southeastern India, makes landfall, brings a lot of impacts to those tuning in the lower level communities, as well as in the areas that are flood prone, as well as all the winds that are going to be with this thing. So that's what we have going on with the NavGem. Last model I want to go ahead and show you is the Icon, and the Icon model kind of gives you a nice little interesting situation to take a look at right here, showing signs of organization and development as time continues to go on, and we start to see something similar to the European, where it takes a little bit longer to organize and develop, mainly due to wind shear, but it does get down to 999 millibars as it starts to slowly approach Burma and Bangladesh over there. So definitely something to pay attention to. But what I can say is 3 out of the 5 models are advocating for an India landfall, and the rest of them are advocating for a Bangladesh-Myanmar landfall. So definitely something to pay attention to. I'd say the rather cone of uncertainty, if the Joint Typhoon Warning Center does put it out, is going to be anywhere from this part of southeastern India all the way to the India-Bangladesh border, unless we start seeing a significant turn towards the northeast, towards Bangladesh. So we'll have to pay attention to it all as time continues to go on, and we will certainly keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. One last thing I want to say before I go is I want to shout out someone who I was kind of talking to about weather. He goes by Shadow Master on YouTube. He's a channel with over 20,000 subscribers. He's a really big weather enthusiast, and we are able to get him on the Storms United Discord server and just kind of chat weather for a bit. So I wanted to shout him out and say, hey, I'm glad we got to talk today, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to kind of just talk weather, because I really enjoy doing that. And for those of you who want to take a look at his content, he posts like compilations and stuff like that. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description down below so you guys can check that out. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. It helps us out, helps us make more videos like these. The goal of this channel is to get more people engaged with weather. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.